Hello and welcome to the Aftershock post-game show. I am here with Jamon Moore to break down San Jose's, 5-0 loss to Orlando City? I think I lost track there at the end.
I think that was the final.
It honestly could have been more. It could have been 6, 7, 8 goals just based on the performance, Jamon. I am here on vacation, so I'm joining y'all in my camp shirt. I apologize, my collar's poor, but it looked like the Quakes were on vacation as well with the way they were playing. I mean, right from the opening whistle, they were just completely overran by Orlando, and with Orlando's quality up front in Luis Nani and Daryl DK, the Quakes were really just not able to compete at the back, and so I want to throw it to you, Jamon, just for your top-level reaction. What went wrong in that game for the Quakes?
Yeah, I mean, if you joined us, on Spaces at halftime, I don't think my feelings changed all that much. After actually, sorry, it wasn't really halftime. It was the lightning delay, and I don't think my feelings changed all that much. Shea Salinas coming on, I thought, brought a bit of energy. I don't think, Tanner Beeson was bad back there. In fact, he probably was a bit of an upgrade over what we were seeing from Alanis earlier. But, for the most part, no one came to play tonight. And I don't think Almeyda came to coach. It was kind of a colossal failure across the board on every element. The man marking was too loose. Everything was too stretched. There was no urgency to stop the ball on the counterattacks. And when you're going up against the team that might be the best counterattacking team in MLS at this point, that's a killer. I mean, you're looking at a team that has Mueller. It has Chris Mueller. It has Nani. It has Benji Michel. You've got Daryl DK up top tonight, and you've got a good supporting cast, behind them. And you just basically let those guys transition you and run you roughshod, and you didn't meet their energy by any stretch. And they just played on Saturday as well. Sure, they didn't have to travel, but it's the same break for both teams, and it's inexcusable to come in with really I felt no game plan for the special nature of how Orlando City plays, and to think that somehow you're going to play a wide open game and match them up and down. I mean, that's a failure of coaching as well as a failure of tactics. And the players either knew it and just didn't come to play, or they underperformed across the board tonight, except for a couple exceptions, like I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like, Murphy's Law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And I think on all fronts, the Quakes were just outclassed. There were too many sloppy passes in the middle, not enough discipline in defense. They didn't have any urgency going forward. I think Shea Salinas was the only player that looked remotely dangerous. Cade Cowell had energy, but he wasn't able to make anything of that. It was just on all fronts an awful performance from the Quakes. And, when you play a system that has a lot of 1v1 battles and a lot of, 1v1 matchups, if you're just worse than the other team and you lose those 1v1 battles, the whole thing falls apart. And that's what happened. Putting Paul Marie, I actually think Paul Marie has been one of San Jose's better defenders this season, but he was just outmatched by Luis Nani. And Paul Marie and Florian Jungwirth up against Luis Nani and Daryl DK, that's just such an obvious mismatch. It seems like negligence on Almeyda's part to have put them out and set them up that way, and not to have recognized that mismatch and try to, plan for that and account for that. Because, I mean, Daryl DK, first of all, his physicality. The Quakes just weren't able to compete. You had Judson marking him on that corner he scored from, or free kick he scored from in the second half. Judson's like 5'6", tiny. Daryl DK he's going to win every physical battle, every header in that situation. And then you put Florian Jungwirth up against a guy like Nani. Florian Jungwirth is known to go into challenges. He's going to overcommit in most challenges. That's how the Quakes allow that first penalty. He goes in really, really aggressively, completely unnecessary challenge, doesn't win the ball, gives up the penalty, and it's all downhill from there for the Quakes. They're just not a team that can react well after scoring early. I think every time they've allowed early this season, they've gone on to lose, and they haven't looked very good. And so I just think for all those reasons, there were really, really no positives tonight. I'm struggling to think of anything that makes me optimistic heading into this weekend's game against the LA Galaxy, Jamon. Can you think of anything?
No, other than, home cooking, right? I think, the only positive is that 18,000 fans back in the stadium hopefully will be a catalyst to kind of snap this team out of the doldrums and have them bring way more energy than we saw tonight. But that's not going to fix Almeyda's tactics. If he allows the Galaxy to get up and down, and that team is pretty quick as well. They got some good young players. They've made some decent off-season acquisitions. One of the few teams, honestly, I mean, a lot of people are pointing fingers at the Quakes saying they didn't invest, but to be quite honest, most of MLS didn't invest this offseason. There were not that many DPs added to the league, and most of them were either illegally done by Miami or Cincinnati, got them, and Cincinnati's not doing great either. So, look, it's definitely on Matias Almeyda to find a way to be able to get the players at least back to the level that they were playing toward the end of last season. When you look back at the Seattle game last year, which was kind of the nadir of that particular season, you could kind of look and go like, okay, there were some players resting. They kind of gave up the middle of the pitch, started players who they shouldn't have started and things like that. Tonight, I mean, yes, Lopez is out and Remedi's out, but for the most part, this was Almeyda's team. This is the team that he has worked with the front office to get. And he basically said the other day when we talked to him that, that he and the front office are on the same page in terms of the players. Now, we know, of course, he would like better players, but ultimately they're coming to an agreement that these are the players that we can do based upon the budget that this team has. And so, this is his team. And now we're seeing that with his team, he's not getting, more out of them. He's getting far less.
Yeah.
My girl just turned the light off in the room.
Well, it's like the game where they had the lights turning on and off at the stadium in Orlando, Jamon. But I agree with what you're saying. I mean, you mentioned the loss to Seattle last season, like the 7-1 loss. This felt very much in the same, realm as that game. It felt like one of them where every time Seattle was going forward, felt like they were going to score. Tonight, every time Orlando got a counterattack, got the ball in the final third, it felt like they were going to score. The Quakes were just completely unmoored back there. And, they've lost now 5 of their last 6 games, I think it is. They have 1 goal in that stretch. It's just not good enough. This is a team that runs very hot and very cold. And right now, this is a really, really bad slump. And it makes you start asking some tough questions about Matias Almeyda, about Jesse Fioranelli, and about ownership. And we're going to be speaking with Matias Almeyda in the post-match press conference very shortly. So I encourage everyone to stick around for that. His press conferences are always entertaining, and they're absolutely must watch after a game like this. I think we're also going to be speaking with Shea Salinas. I think he's the other player who will be joining us in the post-match press conference. They're only making 1 player available tonight for us to speak to. Jamon, I want to ask you about some of the...
Not a surprise they picked the player that we're not going to go after, right?
Yes, not a surprise they're putting out Shea Salinas. But Jamon, I want to ask about Jackson Ewell and Judson in that midfield, because you're talking about how this team is regressing from the level they were playing at last season. And those were 2 guys last season who were dominating the midfield, especially in that last stretch of games. They had a really solid partnership in there. Jackson Ewell earned himself a place in the U.S. men's national team camp. Judson was, I think, one of San Jose's best players in that position. Jesse Fioranelli was saying if he were American, he would have also earned a spot in the U.S. men's national team camp. But tonight they played together and they just look completely lost in there, I think. And I think both of them have really struggled this season to assert themselves. Judson struggling with fitness, struggling to make his way back into that lineup. And Jackson Ewell just struggling to impose himself. Is that your impression, Jamon? What did you think of their performance in the midfield? Bear in mind, this is the first time that they have started together in that midfield today.
All right, he's back. Unfortunately, my wife can't do everything and manage him right tonight, so we're in a different place ourselves. So everything is a bit abnormal, let's say. Yeah, it's just so frustrating at this point, Alex. To try to figure out exactly what's wrong with this team, and I do think right now we're seeing a bit of why Almeyda didn't want to put Judson out there very quickly. He's clearly not yet gotten back to his form from last season, and it's one of the reasons that I suggested that he take that kind of center back in the 3-4-3, because I think it would ask a bit less of him to have other players around him that can do a bit more. But when Jackson's not kind of making the passes that you're used to, you're not progressing the ball the way that you were. The attack is coming right back at you much more quickly. And one of the things that Anay Patel's article last week demonstrated is that the Quakes have been winning the ball an average of 3 to 4 yards deeper this season than the last 2 seasons under Almeyda. And part of that is Judson not being there and not being able to help get the balls higher. But part of it is that they're just allowing too much kind of in front of them. And I just don't feel like that the man marking is been aggressive enough. There was a point at which everyone was saying, well, it's too aggressive and he needs to kind of sit back and be able to absorb a little bit more pressure. And I feel like right now that he kind of thinks he's doing that, but instead the pitch is getting stretched so vertically that they're really not in the position for transitions to be able to manage them in the proper way. Judson may be a step slower than he was last season at this point. Remedi is not him. Ewell's not him. They're not getting the right pressure to the ball to be able to win the ball back higher. And it's just this kind of cascading effect. And it goes along with the problems that they've had playing out of the back. Frankly, they didn't even get high pressed by a team that likes to high press all that much tonight, because why do you need to when you're winning 3-0 in the 30th minute? So, it is kind of this, I like to liken, Almeyda's system here to kind of a chain, because when, it's only as strong as its weakest link, and whatever the weak link is on any given situation, and we can generalize it by saying, oh, it's the way they're playing out of the back and the trouble's there. They're not stopping the ball high enough and that. But frankly, possession by possession, it can be a different problem, and those different problems are having these just devastating, effects. And it doesn't have to happen every single possession. Typically, it's just a structural breakdown at key points in each game. Like if they have a structural breakdown 5 or 6 times and the other team scores 2-3 goals out of that, and the Quakes only score a goal, they're going to lose. But tonight it wasn't just like one time. It was like 10, 15 times. I mean, I'm just looking at the stats real quick. Orlando had 3.5 expected goals tonight, 17 shots, 8 shots on target. The Quakes only had 1 shot on target. So, the problems were bad enough to allow 5 goals, and that means shots on target, 8 shots on target. And I don't feel like I normally do, where it's like, well, that one was a bit lucky, that was a bit fluky. All 5 goals were like good goals. They were deserved in the situation by Orlando City, quite likely because of breakdown by the Quakes, but they can only play the team that's across from them, and they took advantage of almost every single opportunity afforded them, particularly in the first half.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what the expected goals is, because it feels like Orlando could have had 6 or 7 or 8 goals just based on all the chances they created going forward. And I think it's worth talking more about the press and the man marking system, Jamon, because when Matias is talking about the man marking system, it's usually one of the things that he's saying is making them the protagonist. They're putting pressure on the other team. They are pressing the ball high up the pitch in order to create turnovers, in order to create chances, in order to impose themselves, sort of set the tempo. But that just feels like it's been totally lost in this last couple months. It feels like they're still man marking, but they're not pressing. Something's breaking down up front. They're not winning the ball high up the field, and they're sort of just collapsing. And then it all goes to chaos in the midfield. And that's just not a tenable situation, Jamon.
Not only that, I think the back line is sitting just too deep. And that's leaving. So when that line of pressure is broken, it's leaving these like massive gaps. So I'm not sure. Like if I took and I looked at the positioning of players, and unfortunately, I do get some data from American Soccer Analysis. But one of the things we don't get with American Soccer Analysis is player positioning. But if I had to bet, if I had to compare last season to this season in terms of like the positioning of the players, the back line feels like 5 to 10 yards deeper than they have, at least in the last 2-3 games, than they do normally in this system. And it's just leaving those kinds of gaps because everything is so vertically stretched. Now, the other day, I mentioned this, on the spaces as well at halftime. So apologize for those who took the time to be on that. But for those who didn't, one of the things that Matias Almeyda said in the last press conference was that he wanted the game to get a bit more vertical because he felt that it was an opportunity for them to be able to counterattack. Because if they're going the other direction and the Quakes can win the ball, now they've got fewer players that they need to get through in order to be able to attack the other direction. So from his perspective, it's opening up a counterattack to kind of suck them in and then try to play quickly in behind them. The problem is the Quakes don't transition at the same level of quickness. You saw tonight what a good transition counterattack team looks like. Go back and see how quickly Orlando City does it and tell me one time you've seen the Quakes transition and counterattack the same way, which wasn't a direct speed line ahead by a Shea Salinas or a Cade Cowell or a Christian Espinoza, where they were actually passing through and moving that quickly on a counterattack. It doesn't really happen. And so what's happening is it's actually working against Matias. I looked at the statistics in terms of the number of counterattack scenarios in the last game against Austin. And in the Austin game, the Quakes actually gave up more counterattacks than they got. So from a benefit perspective, it actually worked less effective than Matias felt it did when we talked to him. Tonight, I bet you if I look at those numbers, it's going to be insanely lopsided the other way. I won't be able to look at those kinds of numbers tonight, but hopefully it's something that we can get into, maybe ahead of the Cali Classico.
Absolutely, Jamon. And just a reminder to everybody tuning in that we are waiting for Matias Almeyda and Shea Salinas in San Jose's post-match press conference. Usually after games like this, after losses like this, they take a while. Matias Almeyda is probably grilling them, if I had to guess, in that locker room after the match. And I'm seeing some comments here about the attack. The Earthquakes have no attack right now. They scored 1 goal in their last 6 games. Where is it going wrong? It feels like this was a game maybe where they're missing Eric Remedi in the midfield and him being able to carry the ball forward and start those counterattacks. He was suspended with a yellow card accumulation today, Jamon. It felt like they were missing that ball carrier, that guy to launch the counterattacks. And he's there, every time he got on the ball, it felt like he was slowing the game down. He wasn't looking forward. He would sort of bring the tempo down, and that just really took all the urgency out of San Jose's offense. And they just really didn't create any chances, especially in that first half, Jamon.
Well, keep in mind that Matias Almeyda tonight didn't really play with his wingers again, but he didn't go 3 in the back. So this is when I was talking during the break on Spaces about the fact that there was no structure tonight. It's because normally he plays with a lot of structure. He plays a 4-2-1-3, and what he's looking for is he's looking for that structure to happen from the 4 and the 2, and then he wants something that's more free-flowing from the Enganche 10, which is now Showfeast. Used to be Magnus Eriksson, and for a little while last season it was Andy Rios, and then the winger play. Tonight, it didn't really look like he was trying to play with wingers at all. He didn't look like he was he would look like everything was just kind of like, yeah, centralized, and everything's going to kind of be free flowing and move around, and we're going to try to catch these guys off guard or whatever it was. But there really was no structure there. And, that type of thing is felt. So if I look at last season, I go like, how did they start a counterattack? Normally the way it would work is Judson would probably win a ball in the midfield. He doesn't look to pass immediately, so normally he finds Jackson, and now Jackson's playing the balls out to the wingers, and they start the attack from the wings. That's been Almeyda's for 2 years. In fact, that is something that is Marcelo Bielsa, complete copy. Played through the wingers. These last 2 games, he's sacrificed his wingers. So when the way that the Quakes normally start the counterattack goes out to the wings, well, instead what you're doing is you're kind of just like, I don't know, kicking the ball to Cade Cowell once Cade got in. Before that, you're hoping Christian Espinoza is going to dribble through people. Like, it's not really clear to me, like, what this attack now is supposed to look like. And I feel like he's experimenting, but unfortunately, like, the experimenting is only like hurting the situation. And it's more than it's helping at this point. And he probably would be better served to kind of get back to his structure and get a little bit, better regimented, fix the part in the middle of the pitch about when you're going to win the balls and how you distribute out and start those attacks, get fewer defenders behind the ball that way, and just be more effective. If I take a look at how they did it in previous seasons, it was pretty much like ping it to Jackson, ping it out to Christian Espinoza, have Christian Espinoza lead a break, try to get a cutback, play a dangerous ball across early, play across to the far post, and not much attack on the left-hand side, as we've talked about, quite a bit, Alex. So it just feels like there is no structure to the attack right now. He's looking for people to create something out of nothing. And other than, Showfeast kind of coming close on a couple shots in the last couple games, there really hasn't been much there. And let's be honest, they probably should have gotten a handball tonight. Shea Salinas did create something there. That was a dangerous situation. And, as we've already said, Shea Salinas was one of the few that came to play tonight. But I think the fans are making some really great comments tonight. And, I really would like us probably to spend, as much time as we can trying to address, some of the questions and the comments and concerns, because, I think they've really kind of got their finger on the pulse throughout this chat tonight, and really appreciate you guys coming and bringing your passion, to a show like this. It's very important. You are the reason that we have a show, and thank you for coming and bringing such great comments. All I ask is just try to keep it constructive and positive, and make sure that we keep this a place that people want to be.
All right, why don't we bring in a question right here, Jamon, from Brian. Where has Espinoza been this season? He's been the focal point of San Jose's attack now for the last couple of years. This season, I think he's had 1 goal, but hasn't really contributed much else. What's happened to Christian Espinoza?
Well, I think it's the way that they've been starting the attacks. He's not the focus right now. They're playing, they're trying to find the feet of trophies. We actually heard that. I'm trying to remember if it was JT Marcinkowski, somebody mentioned it after the last game that, hey, what we're trying to do is try to find, trophies in the half channels, the half spaces, and, between the lines, and have him start things for us. Well, that wasn't the way that they played before. It was through Christian Espinoza. So what you're seeing is the lack of focus on the offensive side and in the attack on Christian Espinoza, in my opinion. He's also, the last game, got asked to play completely two-way player, cover the entire right side, kind of in the 3-4, 1-2 or 2-1, whatever that thing was, depending upon the shape that you see. So looks like Shea Salinas is joining us now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. We are joined by midfielder Shea Salinas. Let's go ahead and get started with a question from Jamon Moore.
Hi, Shea. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us after a tough loss. What we saw, maybe take us into the locker room a little bit. Obviously, we have this lightning delay, which is a bit unusual, in the 40th minute. You guys got down 3-0. You're one of the players who came out immediately after that break, almost like it was the second half, even though there was still some time to play. You know, all the comments on social media were really about how much energy you brought out there. But obviously, it's got to be frustrating to end the game already 3-0 at that point. What was said in the locker room at the 40th minute, and what is it you guys tried to take out of that first 40 and bring into the rest of the game?
Yeah, obviously, when you prepare for a game, you never expect to go down 3 goals so early. So it's not something you're really ready for. It's a bit frustrating because we had possession. We were playing well, and they had 3 counterattacks and 3 goals pretty quickly there. So it was a bit of a surprise and a bit frustrating for the whole team. But you know, we told ourselves when we came in for the lightning break to keep our heads up. Obviously, everyone was down, but it was important that we came out and showed that we could fight, that we could bring energy. And I thought we did that. I thought the second half we played with a lot more energy. We still maintained possession. Unfortunately, we still got counterattacked really well, and we lost a lot of steam there at the end of the game.
Thank you, Shea. Next question from Alex Morgan.
Unmuted.
Hi, Shea. Obviously, that's a tough loss to digest. I'm curious, you know, what the feeling it was like in the squad after that, you know, that game, and you know, maybe what were some of the reactions that you had in the team talk after the game? I know usually we speak with Matias Almeyda and then you guys and some of the players. You know, if there's any reason why, you know, he's still in there talking with them, maybe, or why that order has been changed around tonight.
I think there's an overall sense of frustration from everybody, coaching staff, players. It's tough to take losing 5-0. It's not something anyone who likes to compete will take easily. And so right now in the locker room, you know, the first 20 or so minutes, it's quiet. Everyone's frustrated, reflecting on what they could have done better. I was reflecting on what I could have done better. But then eventually we got to pick ourselves back up. We got a big game Saturday. Classico at PayPal Park, and so it's something that, you know, tonight we'll reflect on this, we'll watch video, but tomorrow morning we got to get ready for a game on Saturday, and it's going to be like that the rest of the season. I think we have one more break, and then we've got almost 2 games a week the rest of the season, so it's going to be a crazy season.
Thank you, Shea. We're going to take 2 more questions, starting with Carlos Eustace.
Hello, Shea. Good evening. Obviously, you just talked about it, the schedule stuff. You come from a very high intense game in Texas, to the humidity and the storm here in Florida, which is a lot of miles and very extreme conditions. And it seems to me that at some point also the body takes a toll on that. And does the preparation, or do you feel like you were not physically and maybe like tactically prepared to like endure those things back to back? Like, because there was a point where you looked really gassed at the end, and you could see how the defense was breaking up, and there was these huge gaps in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, the conditions are a factor. To travel the game on Saturday night, that's a really quick turnaround. But I mean, you can make excuses all day after every game. It's not going to help you. We had a big game Saturday, so there's no point in dwelling on what conditions could have been better. We're looking at going forward Saturday and coming out with more energy, more control of the game, and shutting down their attack and scoring more goals than them.
Thank you. One final question from Jamon Moore.
So Shea, I'd like to go back, because you mentioned the counterattacks that happened early, got hit with those counterattacks. But, to be fair, they're known as one of the better counterattacking teams in MLS, right? I'm sure you guys did your homework on them coming in. But it looked like you guys were getting really kind of vertically stretched out, and there was a lot of space for them to counterattack. It seems strange to think you guys came with a game plan to be set up that way for them to be able to be successful with those types of counterattacks. What went wrong from the game plan perspective? What is it that we didn't see tonight, because it didn't ever really come together for you guys and from the game plan side and made it look that way?
Yeah, I don't think it was a game plan issue. I think it was an execution issue. We know they're good at counterattack. So how do you prevent that? You control the game. You have possession. You become a compact team. Get the ball in the attacking half. Move it side to side, and don't force the ball down the middle. First half, we forced the ball down the middle a couple times, and the second half, actually, their last goal, I forced the ball down the middle, and they went and scored. So I think it's just a lack of execution. We got to be patient, go side to side, control the game, and then mark while attacking.
All right. Thank you very much, Shea, and have a safe flight back to San Jose.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys, we will be bringing Matias in shortly. Thank you.
There you go. That was Shea Salinas speaking after San Jose's 5-0 loss to Orlando City, bringing back Jamon Moore to break it down. I want to recap some of what Shea was saying there. First of all, it's a surprise. It was a surprise when I pulled up the screen. Josh and Matias Almeyda. Usually we're joined by Matias Almeyda first. But, in the past, after these kind of, losses, these big losses, sometimes Matias Almeyda has taken a long time. One time last year after a loss against Portland, Jesse Fiorinelli stepped in for him. So something might be going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing. But, what we did hear from Shea was, about how their game plan, broke down, how they set out to play the ball out wide, keep the ball possessed. But Jamon, it really looked like that just never materialized at all. Literally, I can't think of a single play out progression that they had passing out of the back and building the ball up that succeeded in that way. And I can't think of any really good defensive structures that they had. It never felt like they were prepared at all. And so that makes me wonder, should they have stuck with the 3-4-1-2 that they played against Austin FC last week? That's something that they had introduced against Austin, that they'd worked on during the international break. Does having, an extra central defender help you defend Daryl DK? Does that having those wide men help you build out of the back? Should Matias Almeyda have stuck with that new 3-4-1-2 today, Jamon?
Well, one of the things we have to keep in mind about the 3-4, 2-1-1-2, however really it was supposed to be interpreted, was that he basically sacrificed his wingers in that game too. And if we kind of read into Shea's comments here, he talked about the importance of staying compact and having that structure, which is what we talked about. We saw no evidence of it tonight, and so from the get-go, it felt like there was no game. The game plan was not really to have that type of structure. And basically it was almost the opposite, right, of what we actually saw, according to what we heard from Shea, that they wanted to play with width. That tells me that it was more of the classic approach of the, the 4-2-1-3, but he didn't have wingers that stuck to the sideline. If Shofis was supposed to be a winger tonight, he kept coming in and playing like he was the 10. And if the game plan was for Espinoza to be able to pin to a sideline, well, he kept going kind of sideline to sideline, and there was no real definitive type structure that you would expect in particularly a road game where you want to be able to have that that structure is supposed to help you to be able to play kind of that close, tight road game where you could walk away with a point if you can't get the ball in the net, that type of thing. And so, but there was no evidence of that tonight. I guess without Remedy, Matias must have thought that wasn't a viable approach. I personally, I could have easily seen Alanis playing in the middle and Flo to one side and Beeson on the other, and then you go with Judson and Yule in the middle. So I can see how it could work. He just clearly didn't think that was the approach tonight. What did you see in that, Alex?
I mean, it was just a complete, breakdown, Jamon. And quite frankly, I think they would have been better suited in the 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-1-2, if only because they have more defensive numbers back. I think that, knowing that they had a tough, game just last weekend. They have another game against the Galaxy this weekend, knowing they're playing against one of the best counterattacking teams in the league with Daryl Dike and Luis Nani. I think this is one of the games where Matias Almeyda just needed to go in with a really pragmatic approach and sit deeper. You can, in the 3-4-1-2, you can sort of sit deeper with a bank of 5 at the back. And I think if they had taken that approach, they would not have gotten blown out 5-0. If they had tried to, keep the game close, maybe they could have sort of gone for a smash and grab victory. But because they exposed themselves so much, it just totally broke down. And I think it leads to a lot of bigger questions, Jamon. In the chat, I'm seeing a lot of, comments about the ownership and, about whether the ownership starts to watch a game like this and lose faith in Matias Almeyda or Jesse Fiorinelli. And, maybe they can get away with it if it's on the road, but you go home, the Cali Clasico this weekend, if you lose like that at home, I think there have to be consequences, Jamon. How do you think, ownership, how do you think the front office looks at a game like this and digests it?
I think they hope it's a Tuesday night and people aren't paying attention, to be quite honest. It's, how many people are watching MLS on a Tuesday night, other than the most dedicated fans. But unfortunately, it's the most dedicated fans who take a loss like this the hardest. And I think you can see it from the comments tonight in the chat. Fans are not happy, about getting blown out on the road. Look, good teams can go on the road and get blown out, but there's usually something you can point back to go like, okay, this is what they typically do. They didn't execute this well tonight. They got broken down in this way, and this is why it happened. But you look at a loss like this, and it's just like, what do you say to a game where there was absolutely no positive really to take away from? I mean, if Shea Salinas was 24 years old and flying up and down the sideline like that, you might go like, hey, look at that youngster. He's got a great future. We've got that to hold on to. But even your youngsters didn't perform all that well tonight overall. Like, I don't think Tanner Beeson had a bad game, but, it wasn't like, a standout performance from him either. So, there's very little that I feel that, people can kind of hang their hat on and try to build from for a game like this. Honestly, it's going to take the energy of 18,000 in a stadium, I think, and just more willpower to play that kind of compact, structured type offensive game. I guess the thing that kind of, I felt like maybe this wasn't the right time to play with the 3 in the back was just because it got so vertically stretched the other night that I felt that, well, going back to, kind of the 4-2-1-3 would provide more structure, it wouldn't get as stretched out and such. And we did kind of see that in the second half against Austin as well. But they got stretched completely anyway. And I don't know if it was the presence of Daryl Dike. I don't know if it was the speed of having, Nani Mueller and such out there, Benjamin Michel as well. But, it was just not good. It just, everything, there was just gaps all over the place. And unfortunately, from a television view, like, you see like, 8 players on the screen and about 30 yards of space in between, like, 4 players here and 4 players here. And you can't see the entire pitch like you can when you're sitting in a stadium. So we can kind of only conjecture about how the rest of it all kind of looked, in some of these transitions and such. But, I'm pretty certain that even if you had the full pitch view tonight, you would just go like, wow, there's a lot of holes all over the place. I think we had some non-Quakes fans joining in some of our threads going like, I feel like I could like come out of retirement from my pub league and I would enjoy playing against you guys because you just leave like big, huge space all over the place. And I think there are a couple of memes out there about open spaces tonight. So, look, there's nothing about that game that the Quakes can be proud of, to be quite honest. It didn't reflect their system. It didn't reflect their attack. It didn't reflect, anything about what this club, is supposed to be about at this point, 3 years into the Matias Almeyda project, for sure.
And there is one comment here that I think is very constructive, Jamon, and that is that from Brian, that we should use the Patreon money to buy out the team and become owners. Brian, I appreciate the suggestion. That only works if everybody contributes to the Patreon.
We need about 100,000 patrons rather than the 94 that we have today, but we are very appreciative of our 94 patrons. And trying to get to 100, so please help us out.
Exactly. Lots of exclusive content, behind-the-scenes access you get by subscribing to the Quakes Epicenter Patreon. The link is in the description. I know that there is a Slack channel that we have with some of our $5 and $15 contributors, and that Slack chat was going off tonight. The chat was very fun to watch tonight. So appreciate everybody who contributes to our Patreon. And then there is another comment here that
Marcelo's got a good one now. He says, put all the Patreon money into Dogecoin, and when it reaches, what number is that? If I put commas in there, I think it's 20 million.
I'm not quite sure the Quakes cost that.
We can't even buy 20 million for that. You went there. You went there. I mean, come on, Orlando City just got sold for 750 million. So given the 5-0 loss tonight, I mean, I don't know, divide 750 million by 5. You know, how do you figure that out? How's that math work?
I think you got to take a couple of zeros off that one, Jamon. But I'm seeing another comment here. It was from Brian. Beeson should be starting over Flo. I think there are a couple things when I look at the lineup that I would change, and I think are fairly easy changes. First of all, Andy Rios. You know, you talk about him starting up front. Probably the main thing that he's supposed to contribute is sort of starting the press, launching the press, and sort of the more defensive aspects of being a forward. But I can't imagine that that's worth it. That's just not worth it tonight when the press totally breaks down. So if he's not contributing defensively, he sure as heck isn't contributing offensively. I don't think he did anything on the ball going forward today. He was completely absent. I forgot that he was playing in the second half just because he wasn't able to get on the ball, wasn't able to impact the game at all. So if you're looking at the starting lineup, I think taking off Andy Rios and putting in basically anybody else, and then maybe, as Brian's saying, replacing Beeson, putting in Beeson for Flo, you know, could those be two just easy swaps that would make this Quakes team better, Jamon?
Well, there is one time where last season, and it was just one game, I think it was because of, if I remember right, yellow card accumulation for Flo, where Almeyda played Alanis on the right and Beeson on the left. My recollection is that it was a loss where they gave up the halftime lead. Trying to remember, I think it was when Vancouver was playing in Portland, so that was really confusing. If I remember right, it was because, you know, Vancouver couldn't play in their stadium. They were playing, you know, at Providence Park in Portland, and the Quakes lost the second half lead. They had a lead going into halftime and then lost it. You know, so, you know, could it work? Yes. Is it necessarily like the be all end all solution? No. I think that the secondary transfer window honestly can't come quick enough, whether it's Nathan Cardoso or someone that we haven't yet heard about. Hopefully there is a right center back that's coming. I think you definitely have to replace Flo in the position. I just don't think he's got the ability to be a starter right now in that particular position, at least not the way that this team plays and need. He's great in emergency situations. He's a fantastic emergency defender. We were able to say the same thing about Guram Kashia, to be quite honest. But the Quakes need a bit more than just emergency defending right now. They need people who can actually go 1v1, win those 1v1 battles, win the ball, and ideally win it up a bit higher than the center backs, to be quite honest. But you know, you have to be able to play a higher line. They're sitting too deep right now. And the only way you can play that higher line is if you have people who are mobile enough to be able to react in the counterattacks when the ball's going to be played in behind. I kind of wonder if one of the reasons they're sitting back is because there's really not a lot of confidence that they can handle the speed of a team, you know, like Orlando City. And so we have to sit deeper to prevent them from getting in behind us. Well, you can see how well that worked. It didn't. And, you know, I don't think ever playing in that way and leaving a bunch of space in front of you and letting them, you know, make the passes that they want to make, you know, right in front of you, and you're trying to like sort out numbers and things like that, is ever a way to play kind of a successful, you know, soccer match. And again, you're going to be facing the LA Galaxy, who are going to also have that type of pace, you know, maybe not quite as clinical as Orlando City over the season. But there are moments where the Galaxy have been good in the counterattacks. And so you have to figure out pretty quickly how you're going to be able to play a higher line, but be able to handle, you know, the pace.
Yeah, Jamon, and I think to some extent, Almeyda recognized just how badly it was going and how much it wasn't working, because he made, after that rain delay, he sort of made a line change in the defense. And that's something I don't think we've seen from him before. I don't think we've seen him pull a central defender like that in the middle of the first half before. He swapped Florian Youngworth for, I think he brought on Shea Salinas, but he moved Judson back to center back. And then he brought off Paul Marie and put on another player back there. A line change like that, is sort of a pretty big vote of no confidence in Flo and Marie. Is that how you sort of understood, how you interpreted those two substitutions?
Yeah, it's hard to say, anything that happens in the midst of that kind of loss tonight. I think there's also the possibility that, you're looking to get people, to opportunities to try to like step up and kind of show what they can do when, the game's pretty much already out of hand. So it's hard to say whether it was for performance related reasons or because he wanted to get somebody on the pitch and he felt that it was a good opportunity to get them more minutes. But that's what it is tonight. There was a question about Matias Almeyda and whether or not he will be facing the media tonight. Again, it is against league policy for coaches to miss pressers, but it would not be the first time Almeyda has. My understanding is there would be at least a fine, and potentially it could come back against the team in some way that we probably wouldn't hear about if the coach misses the presser, but it is part of league policy that he has to do it. But typically, as Alex already pointed out, earlier, he can kind of show an hour late. As much as upset as that would make my wife tonight, it's really kind of out of our control. So we are waiting to hear. So far, all we have been told is that we'll get probably just one question apiece tonight, and that's pretty much what we know. So he's supposedly still coming.
I remember last season, Jamon. I think it was after the 7-1 loss to Seattle. I think that was sort of a later game. And you and I were up waiting, I think till probably 11:30 midnight to talk to Matias Almeyda. That was probably an hour and a half after the final whistle before he finally joined us after that one. And against the Portland Timbers, we spoke to Jesse Fiorinelli instead of Matias Almeyda. So it's possible that happens again tonight. It would be unusual for them to skip altogether. I think the Quakes will send out someone, a representative of either Matias or the front office to speak with us tonight. So I would stay around for that one. And you briefly mentioned earlier, Jamon, Nathan Cardoso was one of the players that the Quakes are looking into at center back. They're rumored to be signing at center back. And I guess the question I have is he really the guy to turn it around? He's coming from a team in the Swiss league that is consistently losing, 2-4-0 and are doing very well. And the last center back that San Jose signed from the Swiss league was Francois Affelter, and that was a terrible flop. So I look at that signing, even though the rumor makes sense. He has connections to the Quakes through his brother, who played for Reno 1868. Even though he has experience in Europe, transfer market values him as couple $1 million player. I think I still hold some reservations. I'm still a little skeptical about whether he's really the guy to fix these issues in the back line. And I know you had a chance to look at a lot of his game tape and study his game tape. So I'm curious if you think a player like Nathan Cardoso can turn it around for the Quakes, or if they need somebody else, if they need just a really high quality DP, outstanding level player to actually make an impact.
It's a great question. We don't see DP center backs a lot in the league, and even when we do, they don't necessarily perform at what you would consider to be a DP level. There can also be very difficult to gauge them. I think in a man marking system, we get a little bit better sense for the individual skill of the player because they're asked to do more individual things than they are if you're playing in kind of like a classic, 4-2-3-1 or whatever the case. So is he someone who can play in a man marking system? is he going to be able to win 1v1s? One of the things we know about him is that he's 6'2". So we're talking about, a tall guy, taller than anyone else that the Quakes started tonight by at least a couple inches or so. One of the things that we were told by Jesse Fiorinelli is that it was very important to find somebody who could get set pieces and get some set piece help. And if everyone remembers, coming into this season, the biggest concern defensively facing the team was that they gave up pretty much a record pace number of set piece goals last season against very, very low expected goals. So, they were giving up goals that they obviously shouldn't. We're just hearing right now from the Quakes media side that they're apologizing for his tardiness, but they say they hope he's coming soon. So that's a sign that we still think he's coming. And so, the profile of the player that they're looking to get, like, it feels like Nathan will kind of fit that kind of profile of player. Now, I don't think we got a good look in terms of like his overall pace and tracking, things like counterattacks and that kind of 1v1 defending, because he doesn't play for a team that plays with the same style, that Matias Almeyda obviously plays in. So, there's going to be some things that we're going to need to leave to our imagination. But, will I take a 6'2" guy over what we have on the field right now? It can only help, particularly. I think he's 26, if I remember right, Alex. So he's coming into the prime of his career. Someone who could, potentially be in the team 3, 4, 5 years and make an impact and be a long-term type player. And particularly for a center back, again, kind of that's starting into kind of like the prime time where you kind of expect, center backs to get to that level. One also hopes that Matias Almeyda, as has been able to do with some players, kind of get them to another level. Now, unfortunately, we've seen some regression on some players this season, but I think if we, looked back over last year, we would see that there were a number of players who got much better with their 1v1 defending, versus 2019 and 2020. Lopez would be, one of the players that I would say got better in that kind of 1v1 defending. I think how quickly we've seen Tanner Beeson be able to become a MLS level center back that you feel comfortable starting, when you need to, is also probably a credit, in good part to Matias, really kind of focusing, getting these players into that kind of 1v1 defending. But, we're seeing definitely struggles from, players who you would expect, should be performing better than they are right now for sure.
And I mean, for me, Jamon, the biggest worry after a loss like this is that, it damages San Jose's reputation on sort of the national and international level. Players don't want to join teams that are getting pummeled, routinely 3-4-0 and are at the bottom of the table. If I am a top European player and I'm thinking, I want to go to MLS, I'm not thinking I'm going to join the San Jose Earthquakes. I'm thinking I'm going to join Atlanta United, Seattle Sounders, LAFC, LA Galaxy. And so to be losing like this and to be, quite frankly, embarrassed and humiliated like this, it makes it harder to sign players. And, I think a lot of players have been willing to give San Jose a shot. They retained Christian Espinosa, probably because of Matias Almeyda's sort of reputation and his aura and his ability to pull players in. But, as his tenure, sort of the clock ticks down on that, his pull is going to become weaker and weaker. And I think it might be harder for the Quakes to sign top level players because nobody's going to want to come to San Jose if they keep losing like this. So I think that's my biggest worry. And that's the reason why sort of, if they keep losing like this, that's why it's unsustainable. And if they lose, 2, 3, 4 more games like this, that's when you're going to have to, I think, start hitting the panic button because that's just unsustainable rate and level at which to perform. I do want to pivot a little bit because I think there is one positive that has happened for the Quakes in the last 2 weeks, last couple of weeks. And it's sort of out of the left field, but while San Jose have been sort of losing in the United States, I think Marcos Lopez at the Copa America has been playing really, really well for Peru. And that's a great thing for the Quakes organization. He's one of the young guys who they have been developing. They signed him when he was 18, 19, and have developed him. And now he's starting for Peru. He's making a big impact against big teams like Colombia and Brazil in the Copa America. And that's just huge for the Quakes. Jamon, have you gotten a chance to watch him in the Copa America?
Yeah, it's been a bit difficult with some of the personal things going on for me to pay too much attention, but I did get to see him on the field with Neymar the other night. Matias is here.
We'll take 2 questions in English, followed by 2 more in Spanish with no translation. Let's go ahead and get started with Alex Morgan.
Unmuted.
Hi, Matias. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's good to see you. You know, you're facing a team with 2 really strong attackers in Luis Nani and Daryl DK, and it just felt like the defense wasn't able to handle them. So I'm curious where you thought sort of the game plan broke down, you know, what the strategy that you had to contain those 2 players was, and where it broke down.
Muted.
Enfrentaste un equipo con 2 delanteros muy fuertes como Luis Nani y Dique. Parecía que los defensores no podían aguantar a defender un jugador tan fuerte. ¿Dónde pensás que se rompió la estrategia y cuál era la estrategia para contener esos 2 jugadores?
Bueno, ante todo, buenas noches.
Firstly,
La estrategia, evidentemente, era totalmente diferente a lo que vimos.
the strategy was obviously completely different to what we've seen.
Hasta los 5 minutos estábamos mostrando ese tipo de juego que pretendíamos.
Until 5 minutes into the game, we were showing what sort of game we were looking for.
Pero bueno, después del penal creo que el equipo se vino abajo.
But I think after the PK, the team dropped.
Orlando no tiene solamente 2 jugadores importantes.
Orlando doesn't just have 2 important players.
Orlando tiene entre 15 y 18 jugadores importantes.
They have between 15 and 18 important players.
Sus laterales son importantes.
Their fullbacks are important.
Sus 2 centrales son muy importantes.
Their 2 center backs are very important.
Sus medios son importantes.
Their midfielders are important.
Y tienen una cantidad de delanteros que son muy importantes.
And they have a large amount of forwards that are very important.
Somos conscientes de esta diferencia de plantilla,
We're aware of this difference in the roster.
pero bueno, vinimos a hacer nuestro juego y evidentemente lo hicimos pésimo.
We came here to play our game, but obviously we played it horribly.
Entonces, cuando sucede así,
So when this happens,
hay que encontrar obviamente los errores, la cantidad de errores que cometimos
obviously you have to find the amount of mistakes that we've committed
y darse cuenta que la MLS cambió,
and realize that MLS has changed.
que los equipos realmente, hay muchos equipos muy fuertes
That there are a lot of really strong teams,
y hay equipos que sacan, ya desde las plantillas hay mucha diferencia respecto a los demás.
and that there's some teams with rosters alone have a huge difference compared to the rest.
Y no dejo de felicitar al rival.
And I'm not going to stop congratulating the opponent.
Realmente lo hizo muy bien.
They really did a good
Y
job.
nosotros, incluyéndome a mí, primero y principal,
And us, and including myself, first and foremost,
muy mal.
very bad.
Thank you, Matias. Next question comes from Jamon Moore.
Hi, Matias. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us despite the hard loss.
Thank you.
So we've a lot of fans are going to watch this press conference with interest. We have some watching live now. Many more will probably watch it later, taped. Those are the most ardent supporters of this club, the ones who stick with it through thick and thin. They've been through a lot of ups and downs, mostly downs. Obviously, this is a big down right now as well. But we have the Cali Clasico, 18,000 fans coming up on Saturday. What is it that you can tell the fans right now to believe in order to come to the Clasico with the excitement and ready to support this team at such an important time for both the club and the community to finally have a full stadium of fans? Thank you.
Hay mucha gente de San José que va a mirar esta conferencia de prensa, muchos ahora en vivo y después mucho más, un poco más tarde. Esos hinchas son los que más han aguantado y apoyado al equipo en buenos momentos y también en muchos malos momentos. Ahora obviamente es un mal momento. ¿Qué le puedo decir a la gente que apoya al equipo ahora que viene el clásico contra Galaxy, dado que es un partido tan importante que es un clásico y vuelve el estadio a la capacidad total.
Nunca me caractericé en mi vida por prometer.
I've never characterized myself by promising,
prometer resultados o cosas que no vea.
I've never promised results or things that I don't see,
Sí el compromiso del trabajo,
but there is commitment with the work,
la sinceridad en el trabajo,
sincerity in the work,
el aceptar cuando hay equipos mejores que el nuestro
accepting when there's better teams than ours,
y el aceptarme mirándome para adentro cuando me equivoco.
and I accept looking inward when I make mistakes.
Hemos ganado muchos clásicos
We've won several derbies,
y nuestra mentalidad va a ser la misma que hemos tenido el año pasado, el anteaño pasado.
and our mentality is going to be the same as the one we had last year and the year before that.
Si hay una cosa que le remarco a los jugadores de cada club que he entrenado,
If there's one thing I highlight to the players in every club I've coached,
es que cuando uno se pone una camiseta de diferente club y la defiende,
is that when you put on a jersey of any club and you defend it,
hay un montón de gente que quisiera ponérsela 5 minutos.
there's a ton of people that would like to put that on for 5 minutes.
Ese es el amor propio que hay que tener.
That's the self-love that you have to have.
Y viene este clásico, donde ellos están evidentemente mucho mejor que nosotros.
And Derby's coming up, where obviously they're in much better form than us.
Y bueno, trataremos de recuperar el plantel anímicamente, futbolísticamente,
We'll try to recover the roster in terms of their spirits and in terms of football.
y como no es el clásico, todos los partidos los jugadores tienen que entregar el alma,
It's not just the Derby, but the players have to give their soul in every single game,
porque ahí es donde realmente le dan valor al lugar que defienden.
because that's where they really value the place that they defend.
Y nosotros entregar el alma en cada detalle.
And we have to give our soul in every detail.
Ese es el respeto que merece la gente,
Claro.
el respeto que se merece cada uno de nosotros, y desde ese lugar es respetarnos.
That's the respect that we have to have for all the fans, the respect we have to have for each other, and from there we give respect.
Thank you, Matias. We're going to switch over to the Spanish portion now and take 2 more questions, starting with Carlos Ramirez.
Hola Matías, buenas noches. ¿Cómo estás? Carlos Mauricio de Telemundo.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, profe, un abrazo a la distancia. ¿Cómo analizas el futuro de este equipo pensando en el plantel? Porque hay ventanas de fichajes. Hemos escuchado a la directiva del plantel hablar justamente de incorporaciones, de fichajes. Y te pregunto si sientes que con lo que tiene tu plantel hoy en día, más allá de las ausencias por lesiones o por convocatorias, como el caso de Marcos, que está en la Copa América, que alcanza para competir. Si es realista decir que lo que tiene San José Earthquakes en su plantilla hoy alcanza para competir con Atlanta, Toronto, Galaxy, Columbus, Orlando, etcétera. Gracias.
Sí, Carlos, creo que, digamos, esta sinceridad que siempre me caracteriza en expresión de cuerpo y alma, digo que nosotros no tenemos el mismo plantel que los demás. Yo acepto este plantel, los chicos se entregan muchísimo, pero todos los entrenadores siempre queremos tener, obviamente, planteles numerosos, porque es donde realmente entra una competencia entre ellos importante. Hoy de repente teníamos un jugador en la selección, un jugador suspendido y un jugador lesionado, y tuvimos que completar el banco con 2 arqueros. Entonces, esto evidentemente, si bien se acepta, y son estas las reglas, pero bueno, ahí se marca una diferencia natural. Hay otros equipos que nos sacan una diferencia en eso, en la composición de los planteles, en la cantidad de jugadores que pueden tener. Entonces nuestro proyecto es diferente a los demás. Esa es la realidad. A mí siempre me ha gustado dirigir para ganar, para ser campeón. Mi mente dice eso. La realidad va a marcar otra cosa, que de a poquito vamos a tener que ir saliendo de esta situación, metiéndole muchísimas ganas, muchísima concentración. Y igualmente hoy hicimos un mal partido, pero estos chicos se entregan al máximo, creo que están dando todo lo que tienen. Y bueno, a veces alcanza y a veces no, y habrá que insistir.
Thank you, Matias. Our final question of the night comes from Carlos Eustace.
Matías, buenas noches, Agustín, que también estás por
Buenas
ahí.
noches.
En el planteamiento del partido y sobre todo con lo que viene, siempre les pides un fútbol muy físico, muy rápido. Obviamente venías de mucho desgaste, vienes en unas condiciones muy complicadas porque en Florida la humedad es impresionante. Pero se rompe el equipo, ¿no? Llega un momento que te quedas defendiendo mano a mano con los dos centrales, Judson ayudando, y hay mucho hueco entre Judson y Jewel. Cuando planteaste el partido, ¿cómo lo habías visualizado para que eso no querías que pasara, pero termina pasando?
Totalmente diferente. Por eso perdimos, y perdimos por 5 goles, y podrían haber sido más. Nosotros estuvimos muy mal plantados en la cancha. Nosotros no ejercimos la presión que debíamos ejercer. Nosotros no entramos por los lugares que mostramos donde teníamos que entrar. Los goles vinieron de errores nuestros. Entonces, bueno, es sentarse, hablar otra vez, mostrar y tratar que no se repitan, pero esta historia ya la vimos. Ya hemos visto lo mismo. Entonces, es darle confianza a los muchachos y tratar de salir adelante, pero sí soy consciente de todo eso que dijiste. Pero no era el partido que habíamos planteado. No vinimos a jugar mano a mano. No vinimos a presionar alto. No, la diferencia la tenemos que hacer con la pelota, pasándosela a un compañero, no a un rival. Después todos los esquemas se rompen. Si de 3 pases vos le das, estás impreciso y se la das al rival, bueno, enfrente tenés jugadores de experiencia, jugadores de jerarquía, y sacás del medio. Si vos regalás un penal, sacás del medio, ¿no? Y esto es lo que nos pasó hoy, pero acá, digamos, cuando va bien, estamos todos bien, y cuando va mal, estamos todos mal. Yo me incluyo. No me aparto de esto.
All right. Thank you very much, Matias and Augustine, and safe travels back to San Jose.
And that was Matias Almeyda in his post-match press conference. I want to read back a couple of the quotes that he was saying, especially the quotes in Spanish. We have some live translation from Marcelo. Marcelo has been in the chat for a while now, so huge shout out to him. He just translated what Matias Almeyda was just saying in Spanish, and Matias Almeyda said this: "I'm sincere, body and soul. Our roster isn't the same as other rosters. And coaches, we want strong rosters. Today we had an injured player, one suspended, and one abroad. Today we had to fill the bench with 2 keepers. Other teams have deeper rosters, and that's the reality." That's some pretty striking comments, Jamon, that Matias is making there. And he'd said basically the same thing in English earlier. He'd said, realize that there are a lot of really strong teams, and that some teams with rosters alone have a big difference to the rest. Realize that MLS is changing. That sounds very critical of the players that he has, the rosters that he's been giving. It sounds like he's not satisfied with the investment from the ownership and what he has to work with right now.
I feel like he plays both sides of the fence on this issue, to be honest, Alex. Like I said, we heard from him last week that this was the roster that he had agreed with the FO on, for the season. To come back now and be able to say, "Oh, just kidding," I don't know, comes off a bit disingenuous to me. That's just my perception of it. Honestly, I think that the mistake was not doing any sort of rotations tonight. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have better players. I think we all kind of know the player situation, but it is what it is. The Quakes are low on the salary side in MLS, but they're not the lowest. And there's a lot of good quality youngsters who are on the bench right now who are not getting an opportunity because he keeps running out his players that he's brought in every single game. And I don't need to point fingers. I don't need to name names. I think we all know, who I'm talking about when I say that. So, he did tonight take a bit of ownership. He said it was very bad, and it starts with me. And that's more than we've seen from him, after most games, to be quite honest. He's never been that guy to go like, I'm at fault, blame me. We don't really hear that from him. Tonight we heard that just a little bit more, but then he made those comments. So it's kind of like, okay, what did you really mean there?
And It is frustrating how you say, Jim, and he plays both sides of the coin. On one hand, early in the season, he says he's happy with the roster that he's been given. And in fact, these are all signings that he has made. Carlos Fierro, Andy Rios, Chofis, all of these players, Abakasis, they're players that he's cleared, that he has brought in, that have connections to him. And so if he's not satisfied with, those players, I think, he can only blame himself, really. But, then on the other hand, he turns around and says, the difference in rosters is huge. We don't have the quality to compete, basically, is what he's saying, and sort of blames the ownership for that lack of investment. So that's sort of a frustrating place, I think, for Quakes fans, where everybody is to blame at the same time, and it's all sort of one big mess. And we're seeing that in the comments. And once again, I just want to give a huge shout out to Marcelo here for translating. I think I'm seeing some comments saying that Marcelo is the hero we need tonight. He is the man of the match, man of the hour. And yes, Marcelo brings up a good point as well. The translation, the full translation of everything that Matias said in Spanish that Marcelo got down is in the Slack channel for Quakes Epicenter patrons. So if you want all that translated live, if you want all of our analysis live, real time during the game, contribute to Quakes Epicenter Patreon. $5 a month will get you into that Slack channel for all the behind the scenes access. The link is in the description. Before we wrap up, Jamon, any final thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I tried to see what I could get from Matias there in terms of, what can the fans expect on Saturday. That's going to be different. I hope what he does is he does a little bit more of the youth, does a bit more roster rotation, lets the players with some energy, with the fresh legs, come on and try to match up the Galaxy, player for player. And is that a tall order? Absolutely. But home field advantage is the biggest, advantage in American sports. We've said that on this show a number of times. If there's ever a game that you're going to have home field advantage in your favor, it's going to be this Saturday at PayPal Park. 18,000 fans and you haven't had a packed stadium in, quite since this first game of last season, to be quite honest. It hasn't been close to full. So this is going to help, I think, push the players. But if you're going to put tired legs out there, it's not going to have the effect that you need. I want to see some rotation. That's really all I'm asking for. Give me some roster rotation. Give me some fresh legs. Give me a different face here or there. But let's not trot out the same old, and expect a different result. That's just insanity, as we all know. How about you, Alex?
Well, look, I think that San Jose, front office, the organization, as you said earlier, Jamie, is going to look at this match and go, we're hoping nobody's watching. It's a Tuesday night, tons of rain delays. The match isn't streamed on national television. It's streamed on Twitter. I think there are 6,000 people watching that Twitter stream at any one time. I think they're hoping that they're going to be able to get away with that one and sort of sweep it under the rug. But they can't do that in the Classico, not in front of 18,000 fans at PayPal Park, not on a game that's on television, not in a big rivalry game like that. If they lose like this on Saturday, that's going to be a huge problem, I think, for this organization. They can't get away with it in a game like that on Saturday. So we'll see what happens. I'm not optimistic, but at the San Jose's lowest point last season, after they've been losing game in, game out like this, they sort of pulled the rabbit out of the hat and turned it around and beat LAFC. And that was, sparked a huge turnaround for them. So who knows, maybe they could have another surprise turnaround like that against the Galaxy. With Matias Almeyda, you really never know. And that's one of the things that makes it so entertaining to watch this Quakes, is that, they might win, they might lose, whatever happens, it's going to be entertaining. And so we will join you after that match this weekend against the Cali Classico. We will be live from PayPal Park joining you after the match. So we look forward to seeing you all then. In the meantime, it's been a pleasure speaking with you all tonight. And thank you for joining us. For Jamon Moore, Alex Morgan here, the whole team at Quakes Epicenter. Have a good one.
Thank you for your comments tonight, everyone. Have a good night.